It's Tuesday, the 11th of December 2006. This is Photo Walkthrough, show number 44, Tutorial 11, Chapter 4.
Hi John, this is Edwin from the south of France. Well, I'm not French, but anyway. You run a great show. I enjoy your tutorials very much. You run them at a nice pace. It gives one a chance to follow along nicely without having to rewind all the time. Great show. Keep it up.
Thanks, Edwin. I really appreciate the comment. If any of the rest of you would like to leave me a message, then please visit www.photowalkthrough.com, where you can find all of our old shows, and on the homepage there is an audio comments box where you can press a button and leave me a message using the microphone attached to your computer. I'd like to just start today with a quick apology to those of you that are paying attention to my release schedule. My original plan with the show was to release a show every week, usually on a Monday or a Tuesday, but I've been slipping a little bit lately and I just wanted to explain why. I have a day job. My family actually owns a ticket printing business, which you can find at ticketprinters.co.uk. We print concert tickets for small orchestras and drama groups, things like that. Now, during the month of December, which is normally our quiet month, our office manager's gone away on holiday, which is fine. December's normally a great time to take that holiday. But since we've started doing some extra advertising this year, we've been extra specially busy, and as a result, I and the rest of my family have been going into the office to cover for him. And as a result, a lot of my days during the week are spent working in the office, and I'm not finding the time to do the show as regularly as I would like. I am doing my level best to keep up, but please do bear with me if I'm a little bit irregular with release schedule over the rest of December. I should be back on track in January when Mike is back in the office, and until then, we'll just plug along as best we can. I'd also like to do a quick reminder for the Tips from the Top Floor Advent Calendar. Every day during December, Chris is doing a special short show containing another photography tip. And also every day we have a new illustration from our good friend Andres from the Tips from the Top Floor forum. You can check out his work at andres.com. That's andres.com. He's an extremely talented cartoonist and illustrator and animator. Check him out. Okay, it's time for today's composition segment, and today I'd like to talk about vanishing point. Like so many compositional techniques, vanishing point is all about leading the eye, but in this case it's a lot more literal than others. Vanishing point photos can actually take the viewer on a journey. Typical vanishing point photos depict a road or a track leading into the distance. Often the road or track resolves into lines that can lead to a particular point in the photograph. Often those lines are related to travel, but not always. At its simplest level, a vanishing point picture merely has converging lines that create a kind of distance perspective. Also often the lines lead to an element of the photo where you want your viewer's eye to come to rest. This would be an example of using vanishing point as a leading line, and I'll cover leading lines in a future episode. But of course a vanishing point photograph can't just be about the lines and the vanishing point. The viewer's eye must travel through the photograph and see things along the way. So vanishing point can be as much about place as it is about movement. One thing to be aware of with the vanishing point is that it can lead the viewer's eye right out of the photo. You can avoid that by keeping the vanishing point in shot, or by having it disappear behind some obstacle, which might create a sense of tension or mystery. So your challenge for this week is to take a photo depicting a vanishing point, but as usual I want to give you some restrictions. This week you must take a vanishing point photo without including a road. Roads are just too easy. So, vanishing points without roads, that's your challenge. And as always, I'll be showing the submissions for last week's negative space challenge later. And remember the restriction there was to take a shot using negative space without cropping. And you can check those out at the end of the show. And just before we get started, I'd also forgotten to mention the names of the people that I used photos from in this week's composition segment, so I'd like to say a quick thank you to Arctic Wolf, C2 Photo, Cover Killer, Derek Arridge, Jason Hightower, and SJ Prokes. This week's tutorial segment was half of a longer segment I recorded all in one go. I'm finding that if I record the tutorials all in one session or in a couple of longer sessions, then it flows better for me and I can remember more easily what it was I did. So if it ends slightly suddenly partway through, the second half of this longer session will be next week, and that will be the final part of this tutorial. Okay, let's get started with today's chapter working on our wheelbarrow image. Right, we need to start today by doing what we should always do, which is thinking about what we're trying to achieve. As you can see here, I've got our starter image, which is very plain looking. What we're going to do is the same thing we did in lab, and the key thing that I want to take away from what we learned from lab is that we're going to work on the colour and the luminosity separately. Remember, in lab or LAB mode we've got luminosity A and B, and the luminosity channel contains just a black and white image, and the A and B channels contain the colour data for this image. So I'm going to take the same approach with this, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to do all of that in RGB, and I'm going to do it all with layers so that none of these changes are destructive, and we can go back and tweak them back if we want to. So the steps that we want to apply to this: step number one, we want to add a lot of contrast and sharpness to the luminosity values in this image, and we want to treat it almost exactly as we would a black and white conversion. We want to give it a really strong, gritty style. The second thing we want to do is we want to reduce definition in the colours, which is going to give it a sort of a colorized black and white feeling, and we might also desaturate it a little bit. So let's bring back our Photoshop palettes and shrink that down a little bit, and let's get started. The first thing I want to do, you can see I've just dragged a copy of this image in here, so just for the sake of argument, let's start with a background layer like that. This is our regular background layer, and the first thing I want to do is I want to separate up right away into luminosity and colour. So I'm going to make groups for this. I'm going to, at the bottom of the layers palette here, we have the little create a new group icon that looks like a file folder. If we click that, it's going to create a new group for us that's empty, and I'm going to drag and drop the background onto the new layer icon, which is going to duplicate it. So now I've got background copy, and I can drag and drop that onto the new group. And if I double click on the name group 1, if I could type it correctly, that would be called the luminosity group. And then I'm going to take that entire group and drag it onto the new layer icon again, and that's going to copy the entire group with everything that's in it, and I'm going to rename that bottom one to colour. The microphone's in the way of my keyboard, I can't see what I'm typing. So there we go, we've got a luminosity group and a colour group. Now, why use groups? Well, the key here is, for a start, we can turn these little arrows that allow us to open and close just the layers that are inside that group. But the key is that it keeps similar edits or related edits together. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to, within the colour group, we're going to blur the background layer in there, and in the luminosity group, we're going to change the luminosity values in this image, and we're going to just use just those luminosity values in our final version of this image. So the key, first of all, is in each of these groups, we can, just like in the past I've shown you, we've got layer blending modes here for a particular layer. So you can also do the same thing for a group. So by default, you see, if I choose the color group, at the moment it says pass through. But if I click on that, I can choose color. And what's happening now is that although that background copy there is a full version of the image, if we alt click on just a single eyeball, we can go to just see that single layer. If I alt click again, everything else comes back. You didn't see any change because what you're actually seeing is that background image. But what we're doing is we're applying through this group that everything that goes on inside that group is going to just take the color values, and that's going to be what we see. Remember, when we look down through the stack of layers here, we're looking from the top down through to the bottom, and what we see here is the complete reflection of all those layers stacked on top of each other. Well, all the ones that have got the eyeball turned on anyway. So that color group is only going to show the color information, and the luminosity group, we just want the luminosity information. So that's the first thing. We're already separating our work up into the color and luminosity, which is going to reflect the kind of edits that we want to do. Now, the other thing that's worth mentioning about groups is that you can also add a layer mask. You've seen before, if I just create a new layer and I was to fill that with black, if I was to fill that with black, now you'll notice that the image is still visible because remember this group is only letting through color information. But if I was to go to here and create a layer mask, remember we can, if I grab a brush, reasonable size brush, and I was to paint black on the layer mask, that now obscures some of the black on the main layer. The same thing is true if I drag that layer mask onto the group. The same thing is true. We can also apply a layer mask to an entire group. So you'll see that there's no layer mask now on that black layer. There's a layer mask instead on the entire group. So we can apply a layer mask to groups just the same way as we can apply blending modes to groups, which means that we can take a whole bunch of edits that might do all sorts of nasty things to the image, and then just apply just those bits of that entire group to our main image that we need. So very, very useful facility groups, and also really good for keeping your workspace organized like this. Now I'm going to start today with working on the luminosity information, and I'm going to do that first of all by doing a black and white conversion on this. I said that we were going to use this image in much the same way as we would do a black and white conversion. Now remember the control keys on a PC, Control 1, Control 2, Control 3. That's on a PC in America or in the UK. Some of these keystrokes can be different in the rest of Europe, and if I had a European keyboard I would help you, but they're all different. So Control 1, Control 2, Control 3, or if you don't want to do it that way, you can go to the Channels tab and you can click individually on the red, green and blue channels. That's what we're actually viewing, is we're looking at the red, green and blue data in this image. Now interestingly here, this is an unusual image. Normally the blue data is not really all that attractive, but I think here, just looking at, normally you get the main contrasts out of the red, you get some nice detail out of green, and you get basically noise out of blue quite often. So I think we do get our main sort of lights and darks out of red, and we do get some nice detail out of green, but I think actually blue is giving us better detail here. So what we're trying to do is give a sort of a gritty image anyway. So noise isn't necessarily too much of a problem for our luminosity data, and it's got a lot more contrast here right away. So going back to our RGB and going back to our layers palette, I'm going to create a new gradient map, not a gradient map, channel mixer. Oops, I'm going to make a new channel mixer, which has just appeared out the screen there. And remember what we do, we turn on the monochrome box, which means that the output channel is going to be grey. And we're going to have to some extent, we're going to have to ignore what we're seeing back there, because remember this group is only letting through the luminosity data. So what we're after now, the luminosity data is only from the red channel there. I actually think we need a lot more blue channel than that. So I think we need, probably not more than 100%. Let's go up to around about 90%. And just looking for somewhere on the red channel that doesn't look too unnatural. Now remember we can turn the preview on and off. And already, if you look at what that's doing to the image, it's actually bringing out, just look at the shadows being cast on the side of the wheelbarrow here. Immediately that's brightening up and we're starting to see the shape of those shadows a lot more. It's actually already adding contrast to the image just by changing the color balance of the way the lightness values in this image are calculated. So we're also getting more shadow here. We're getting a little bit more definition in the ground down here. Look at the way the plant changes. There's a big change in the little weeds on the ground there. So right away making quite a large difference to the image that. So I'm going to press OK on that, and that is basically our black and white conversion done. The next step after the black and white is to really increase contrast in this. I really want to boost this so that it's looking a lot more contrasty, a lot more gritty. So what I'm going to do, I usually would use curves for working on these sort of things. In this case, I actually, when I produced this, used levels. And the reason why I did that is I find levels is a little bit more natural if what you're intending to do is to clip your brightness values. And by clip, what I mean is some values that are not entirely black now, by the end of this, will be entirely black. And normally that's a bad thing. Normally what you're after is trying to keep a good range of values in your image. But in this case, we're working creatively here, and I really don't mind that we're going to start clipping off some values. So I think I showed you the levels palette before, but it's possible I've never showed you the difference between what we've got input levels here and we've got output levels here. Now I think I've mentioned before that these sliders at the bottom, that's a white point slider at the top there, that's a black point slider at the bottom there, and what it's doing, because these are input levels, this is saying the input values in our image, I want black to be anything that is from, in this case you can see that number's changed to 40. If we spread them right out, remember an 8-bit image goes from 0 to 255 in each channel, because 8 bits can only represent the numbers 0 to 255. If I drag that up, you can see that I'm saying everything from 0 to 33 input is going to go to black, which is black here on the output. We're not changing the number of values available to us in the image. Our output levels are still 0 to 255. But what we're doing is saying which of the input values in this image are going to get mapped to black, are going to become black. And that's not, as I say, changing the levels available in the image. It's just changing which parts of the image use those levels. If I just cancel that, let's create a new layer. Right at the top, I'm going to create a new layer, drag it above the luminosity, and then I'm going to just make a quick gradient across it, just to really demonstrate what I'm trying to say to you, because this can be a little bit tricky to follow. So just a black to white gradient. We've got black at the top, white at the bottom. Oops, we've got black at the top, white at the bottom, and I'm just going to hit Control L just to bring up the regular levels dialog. I'm not bothering with an adjustment layer here, but the same thing applies. You see the same levels dialog. Now, if I pull the black slider down, you can see all those values at the top. We've got without that, we've got a lovely smooth gradient. So we've got black at the top, white at the bottom. We've got all these values in between. If I drag the black point up, then I'm saying everything from 57 downwards is going to go straight to pure black. We've still got values from 0 to 255 in the rest of our image. And the same thing applies with the white point slider. If I drag that white point slider down, you can see we're getting more whites at the bottom of the image here. We've still got 0 to 255 in the middle. We've just got some values at the top that used to be not black have now become black, and some values that used to be not white have now become white. Now, that's all very interesting. One other thing, that we've got a midpoint slider which just changes the balance of how the values are allocated. So if I drag that grey slider, that's our midpoint slider, you can see if I drag it towards the white, then we're getting more blacks. If I drag it towards the black, we're getting more whites. So that's all very useful. Just going to the output slider. So what effect would the output slider have on this? Well, if we've decided that we've got a bunch of black values and then 0 to 255 in the middle, and then a bunch of white values, if we drag our output level black up, what's happening is it's saying all those values that are clipped at black, we actually don't want them to be any darker than, say, in this case 84, which is, as you can see, is a sort of a mid-grey actually. So we can stop black appearing in the image entirely by doing that. And the same thing happens if we wanted to make that white into a darker grey. We can just drag the white point down. And this is reducing the number of values available in our image, but that might be what you need in certain circumstances. So that's the difference between input and output levels. I'm going to cancel that, and I'm just going to quickly also show you image adjustments, how you might do the same thing with curves. Because as I've said to you many times, all these things that you can do in levels, you can also do in curves. So that business of dragging the black point down, black point up, so that we get some values mapped to black that weren't black before, all we do is we take the bottom point here and move it to the right. And if we want to do the same thing with the whites, we just take the top point here and move it to the left. And all of a sudden we've got a load of whites here that weren't there before, we've got a load of blacks here that weren't there before. We've still got 0 to 255 in the middle there because this black point here is right at the bottom. So we've got input values across the bottom, output values up the side. So just in the same way as in the layers dialog, we've got input values at the top in the top sliders, and we've got output values in the bottom sliders. In curves, we've got input values at the bottom and output values at the side. And if we want to change the balance of how the values are allocated, we put a point in the middle and we drag it to the left or the right, and we get that nice curve. That is exactly what the levels window is doing. And if we want to brighten the dark values, so if we want to stop there being black in there, we take that point and drag it up. And as you can see, that's now goes a grey. I can drag it all the way up until our blacks are no longer black; they're closer to white. And likewise with the white values, I can drag that down and make our whites into greys. So the curves clearly can do all the same things levels can. The only difference is that with curves you can have multiple points on here and you can really change the characteristic of how the values are allocated. You just can't do some of these things. Look at that. We've got black through to mid-grey through to mid-black to dark grey through to white. Can't do that with a levels window. So that's curves and levels very briefly, and probably in more detail than we've done before. Going back to our luminosity data, what I actually want to do here is add a levels adjustment layer. So remember, this button here is for the adjustment layers. New levels adjustment layer. And with the window that pops up, I am going to clip off a whole load of dark values. Now you can see that's darkening up the image. As I drag that to the right, we are intentionally removing detail. And if you look in here, in the darker part of the image, in the shadow, what I'm doing is blocking up some detail in the bottom there. So probably don't want to go much further than about that, because that is starting to look a little bit dingy now. I'm also going to drag the lightness values, the white point down a little bit, which is going to give us more light values. More of those values that used to be almost white are now going completely white. So I'm going to drag that down to, I want it sort of a little bit dim and dingy. And I think probably let's just mess a little with, what's interesting here is that this midpoint slider is letting us control how bright we want the inside of the wheelbarrow to be. So I think, see, what interests me in this image is the detail here on the front of the wheel and down here on the edge of the wheelbarrow, particularly the light there. The detail on the inside of the wheelbarrow, not especially sharp, and not, to my mind, not especially important to the image. So I'm going to let it go a little bit darker. So that's probably a reasonable place to leave it. See if I can be a bit braver with my blacks. Okay, that's a little braver, a little bit more contrast than I had just a moment ago. Now if I turn the preview on and off on that, we can see that's adding a huge amount of contrast, and already it's starting to look like the image that we're aiming for. You can see that we get an almost sort of solid black in the back, in the wheel at the back there. It's actually starting to remove some detail in the background. It's reducing and simplifying as well, because we've got data in the back here that just becomes a lot less important in the structure of the photograph, just by reducing some of the detail in the darker areas of the image. So I'm going to press OK on that, and we're going to leave it there for today. I will finish this tutorial up next week. The final chapter will be the last one before Christmas, and I'm planning to take a couple of weeks off to spend some time with family over Christmas. So watch out for next week. With any luck, I'll have a special for you over the Christmas period. and I will catch you next week. Thanks for watching. Oh, and before we go, let's take a look at the submissions for the negative space assignment that I set last week. I've been running these at the end of the show. There's too many really to do individual comments on, and also last week I ran the credits over the top of them for the first time because I was starting to get so many that I thought it was taking quite a lot of time up in the show. I'd love your feedback on whether or not you think that's okay or disrespectful or whatever. Just let me know if you've got any ideas how it can be done better. I'd love to hear those too. Check us out at www.photowalkthrough.com. You can email me at photowalkthrough@gmail.com, or you can drop a note in our Flickr group, which is Photo Walkthrough group also, on Flickr, or the PW Assignments group, PW_assignments. Okay, that's it. Check out the submissions. I'll catch you next week. Photo Walkthrough is a weekly video podcast. You can subscribe through iTunes or by visiting www.photowalkthrough.com. Subscription is free and new shows will be automatically downloaded as soon as they're released. And if you'd like to get in touch with the show, email photowalkthrough@gmail.com or leave a comment using the audio comments box on our homepage.
Photocastnetwork.com, your photography resource in the podosphere. Photocastnetwork.com